Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. We're doing this by looking at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John in chronological order. And today we get to the story of Peter finding a coin in the fish's mouth. Um, Yesterday we looked at Jesus predicting his death the second time, and this was as part of their travels, and so we're the next step in this story. And so Matthew 17, verse 24 is where this takes place, 24 through 27. And it says here, on their arrival to Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" And Peter replied, "Yes, he does." Then he went inside the house, just really didn't think about it. But before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, "What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people that they have conquered?" And we'll look at why he's asking this question. They tax people they conquered," Peter replied. "Well, then," Jesus said, "the citizens are free. However, we don't want to offend them, so go down to the lake and throw in a line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you'll find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us." And so, looking at this temple tax that it starts out talking about that this the collectors asked Peter about. All Jewish males had to pay um, a temple tax to support the temple upkeep, right? And tax collectors would set up booths to collect these taxes. And only Matthew, right? Only Matthew records this particular incident that happens. And more than likely, the main reason that Matthew probably records this, and it came to mind for him, was Matthew himself was a tax collector, so it makes sense for him to recall this story and actually tell this story. And so Peter answered this question, right? This question that the tax collector asked him without really knowing the answer and putting Jesus and the disciples in an awkward position. And one of the warnings we need to be careful in is, and I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, is if we don't know the answer, we need to be willing to admit that we don't know the answer. And or if you're not 100% sure, find out. And so that was one thing I've always learned in teaching, and early on in teaching. I've always tried to uphold to the standard of, if I don't know the answer, then I'm going to tell you I don't know. But I'm going to be willing to try to find out the answer for you. And so, do my best, because it's a learning opportunity for multiple people, right? As the person who teaches, we try to study, we try to know as much as we possibly can, but we can't know it all, and we're not going to think of questions like everyone else does all the time. And so, when someone asks a question we don't know, instead of trying to, you know, pretend like we know something that we don't, people will see through that anyways. Just say, "I don't know. I have no idea. But hey, let me write this question down. We'll look at it and I'll get back to you." And that's, this is what Peter should have done. Peter should be like, "I don't know. Let's find out." And so, however, right, Jesus uses this as a learning opportunity. And also to show his kingly role. Just as kings, right? They don't pay taxes and collect none on from their family, right? The king, Jesus being the king, owed no taxes, right? And so that's what he was asking Peter when in this conversation about, who pays the taxes, the people or those who had conquered, and obviously it's those who are conquered. And so Jesus was setting up the example here that, hey, I don't have to pay taxes. I'm the king. I don't have to pay taxes, but Jesus supplied the tax payment for both himself and Peter, rather than to offend those who didn't understand his kingship. It's interesting. Like, there are times where he doesn't seem to mind upsetting or offending the Pharisees, right? And I think this may have been one of those different cases, because this wasn't a Pharisaic type thing, or wasn't the Pharisees trying to tempt him. It seemed like it was just the guys who collected the temple tax saying, "Hey, have you paid your temple tax?" And so, Jesus was like, "Hey, we don't, this is not an area where I want to cause offense." And so he goes and has Peter go to get this coin so they can pay it. And so the other thing around this too that's interesting is, although Jesus did, supply the tax money, Peter had to go and get it. Right? Jesus could have just had a coin. He could have made a coin appear if he wanted to, but he makes Peter go and work for it. And so I think that's an example, of learning example to us too, is that ultimately, right, all that we have comes from God and God's supply. But we may have to be active in that process, right? He doesn't, a lot of times, most of the time, I would say most of the time, he doesn't just hand us things, right? We still have to work for it. Like if we pray for something, right? It doesn't just fall in our lap. We still have to pray for it. And working in Jesus's ministry and stuff like that, there's things we still have to work for. We have to still have to work to be able to provide in those things. So I think that was a good lesson that he used there for Peter too, and he probably did that for Peter for speaking up without fully understanding and fully knowing what he was saying. And so, and that's the one thing I love about Peter. I think a lot of us can relate to Peter because Peter just keeps opening his mouth, right? Sometimes he's right, other times he's wrong. We've seen that in the last couple of days where the first time he confesses that Jesus is the Messiah, and then right after that, he's trying to stop Jesus from dying on the cross, and so it's just like he flip flops in the back and forth, and his intentions are good. He's well meaning, but he's just got to be more careful in who he is and how he represents. And so the other thing we have to learn from this too, as God's people, right? We are foreigners on earth because our loyalty is to, and always should be, to the King, right? To our King Jesus. And so, but we still have to cooperate with the authorities and be responsible citizens. And sometimes, I think we struggle with this, especially as Americans. I've seen, and especially in the church, this is something that's creeped into the church that I think we got is politics. Like politics has creeped into the church to where, if you look many times in a lot of the churches, you look at it and it seems like the people care more for being a Republican or a Democrat or some political party or some political movement. They seem more bound to that than they do actually Jesus and his teachings, right? And we're to be separate from that, right? Not to say we shouldn't care about people who are running our country and stuff like that, but that should come after Jesus. That should come after our commitment to Jesus and stuff like that. And so as ambassadors to another country, right? We're just ambassadors here. We just live here. This isn't our permanent home, right? And so as ambassadors to other countries, right? We need to keep the local laws. We are. Jesus or Paul writes about this. And so we have to, keep the local laws and we have to represent well the one who sent us, right? So Jesus has sent us, right? We're not citizens of this world. But we still are to obey the laws. So as long as they don't go against what God teaches us, we are to do it. So we are to pay our taxes. We are to obey the speed limits, right? Something I'm not very good at. Those type of things. But that's what we're supposed to be, because as Christians we represent Jesus. And so we need to make sure we represent him well and obey and do, what we're supposed to do and obey the laws of the Lamb. And so, the question then is, as Christ's ambassadors, we see that in 2 Corinthians 5:20, are you being a good foreign ambassador for him to this world? And that's the question, right? Are we being a good representative of Christ for people to see? We need to make sure that we're doing that because that's what we're called to do. That's who we're called to do. And so I think a couple things we need to learn from this is, one, if you're not sure, say you're not sure. Say you don't know. Don't just speak out of turn like Peter did. I mean, we're all guilty of this because we don't like to, I don't think anyone likes to look like they don't know what they're doing, right? Or talking about, right? And so I think that's what we see with Peter here. But Jesus uses this as a great example to show, hey, you know what? I'll provide, but you're going to have to work for it. You opened your mouth, and I'm going to provide the tax, right? Even though I don't have to pay the tax, I'm going to pay the tax, but you're going to have to work for it, for your part of it. And then also he shows us that, the part of us being ambassadors to this world, right? Where Jesus he could have been like, I'm not paying your tax. I'm Jesus. I'm God. I'm not paying your tax. But he didn't do that. He didn't want to offend the people, especially with the temple. And so he did it. And so he's showing to us how we're to be good ambassadors to wherever we're at, whatever country we're in, whoever we're part of. We see that in the Old Testament a lot, where those who went, those Jews who were held captive or taken captive and brought to foreign countries, how they were good representatives of who they were supposed to be and the God that they followed. And that is what's I think most important here in the lesson is that's who we're supposed to be. That's who we're supposed to represent. And so when people see us, they should see Jesus and his example. And that's what Jesus wants us to do. And that's the example he gives us. As always, I appreciate everyone who watches these videos. If you've learned something from them, I ask that you please share them. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please ask that you do that. We're going to continue to try to put these videos and these lessons out, and I hope that you all continue to learn from them. And as always, I appreciate you for watching.